Money is power. Money is independence. When women have more money, it's better, not just for women, but for all of us, actually.
Anna Hartvigsen. She is the co-founder of Female Invest, a global community and learning platform that has empowered women in more than 100 countries to take control of their financial future.
Women in general just struggle to be included in high-powered networks because they're often made up of men. The moment you walk into the meeting, you just know no matter what I say, I'm done. They don't want to invest in anything by or for women. We stopped counting after 107 no's. We ended up raising $24 million. When we closed the money, I expected that now it was over. Now we could be happy. But what happened is that we got so much hate. When you're told over and over again that you don't fit in, that you don't have potential, then it's very hard to not start believing it.
What are the things that women miss, the big things that we don't know?
The biggest mistake I see women make is...
Anna, I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing, amazing. So, Anna, I want you to go back in time. What sparked this interest in finance, in investing? I don't know if this is how you grew up. Can you share?
So I come from Denmark, from a small city where no one talks about money, no one talks about investing. But I was always quite interested in money, even as a child. I remember I would do all types of chores, make up little jobs to make money. And I started working when I was 13. So by the time I was 19, I'd actually saved up quite a bit of money. And that's when I learned that the value of your savings is actually going down because of inflation. And that's what really sparked my interest in investing.
That's incredible. And you have a great story that you literally go to the bank and you want to invest. Just share that for a second, because it's actually interesting that at the age of 19, you already had so much awareness to things like this.
Yeah, so when I was 19 and when I learned, that the combination of inflation and interest rate meant that my savings were losing value, I booked a meeting with my bank, which I'd never done before, because I wanted to buy property. Because, everyone have heard that buying property is a great way to grow your money. And I remember I showed up and the very nice advisor that I have prepared a full hour meeting where she just went over a PowerPoint slide deck with all of the reasons why I could definitely not borrow any money because I didn't make enough and I just didn't qualify for a loan. And at the time, I thought it was really embarrassing because I totally understood where she was coming from when she went through that. And I never applied for a loan at a different bank because I thought that when the bank says no, then the bank says no. And so I went back home and I started thinking about other ways to grow my money. And I remembered watching, the news where all the little ticker codes from stocks would, roll during the evening news. And so I started learning about investing, and little by little, I learned more, started investing more, and ended up taking over my parents' investments as well.
It's just so incredible. So it all started from some kind of hunger to understand more. And I'm, it's interesting to see if there was a certain event that made that so clear. But in business school, you're already very passionate about this topic. You were talking about it, right? So how did you meet Emma and why was it so interesting and, for you at that time?
When I started business school, I'd already been investing for quite a few years. And I did have a few years where I was trading every day and it worked so well. I made a lot of money during that time. So I talked a lot about it also to find like-minded friends. And I just couldn't find any women. But Emma, one of my co-founders, had heard from other people that I'd been talking about investing. And she was working at a bank as a certified stockbroker, the youngest ever in Denmark at the time. And so she went up to me one day and asked if I wanted to do something with investing for women. And that's how Female Invest started. And our third co-founder, Camilla, joined shortly after.
I love that. And I think for listeners, this is all about the hidden market. And I think it's all about speaking, right, about your dreams. I think there's a lot of myth around hiding your dreams or hiding your goals or hiding what you're trying to work on. And the truth is, if nobody knows about it, nobody can help you either. And the chance that somebody is actually going to steal your brilliant idea is so is so far off, because the ideas are endless, and the execution is what really, sets people apart. So, and I love it. So you spoke about it. People somehow knew that you're interested. Emma came in. But again, you could have chosen the regular, and I think you did a little bit, the McKinsey route, paying well, comfortable. What made you decide, no, I want this new world?
It was a very difficult decision, but it also happened gradually over a longer period of time. So as a person, I think the same reason why I was so attracted to money from an early age, it was all about the freedom, the opportunities. And so at business school, I was very attracted to, the best job I could think of at the time, which was working at McKinsey. So I worked really hard to land a job offer from there, and I got it and I signed it. And the starting salary is great, obviously. Everyone congratulates you and understands that this is a great opportunity. But at the same time, I also had female invest growing on the side. And even though there was no prestige connected to female invest, there was no money connected to it, I just felt passion in a way I'd never felt before. And so it ultimately became a choice between wild passion and then the route that everyone else would understand and that would pay well. And I figured that if there was ever a time in my life where I would just go with the passion and choose uncertainty, then it would be now, because I was so young. I didn't have children. Right. I had no commitments. And so I took the leap, but it was definitely not difficult to turn down that safe future.
Do you remember like a specific conversation that somebody's like, Anna, like, what are you doing? Why are you ruining your life? Or was it pretty much, go Anna, let's go follow your passion?
Most people didn't understand it in the beginning, especially because, I know it's crazy to imagine now, but back when we started Female Invest, entrepreneurship, at least in Denmark, was not a thing. Like I never heard of someone who started a company. So even with my parents, when we talked about it, they kept saying that, I had to get a real job at some point. Like no one thought that doing your own thing, was a real job. And so on top of choosing that uncertainty, there was also, just justifying all the time that This is not, time off. Like I'm working actually on something.
I love when people think that it's time off and you're actually working your brains out. But
day and night, like so hard, the hardest job I've ever had, especially the early days, because it's so scrappy. You have no money. You have to do everything yourself. But it was also very fun.
Let's talk about those early days, Anna, because I think, there's a myth around, seeing somebody like you with all the accolades after you raised $24 million and saying, oh, it's so easy for Anna. It's hard for others, but it's so easy for her. I want us to go through like from the creation of that tiny Facebook group and, walk us through like step by step. And some of those fears in the beginning and maybe doubts, because the truth is it does come from doubt. Like there's not enough conviction to say, oh my God, this is going to be big.
So maybe first to your point of thinking, oh, it's so easy for Anna. I think as humans, when we see other humans doing well, we just assume, oh, it's easy for them, or they don't have the same problems or the same fears, but it's just as hard. I had it recently where I shared on my Instagram some fears I had, and so many people responded that they could see themselves in that, but that they never imagined I felt that way. But I mean, of course I do, and I still do on a daily basis when we try new things. And in the very beginning of Female Invest, it was no different. We had no money at all, as in nothing. We didn't know anyone with money. We had no experience in building companies. We had zero network. Like we didn't know anyone who knew anyone. So it was completely from scratch. I didn't even know what funding was. So when people think that it's too hard to start because they don't know anything, that's literally how we started. Most of my learnings actually came from podcasts. And so we would just learn, day by day, how to build a website, how to build a community. We set up an Instagram account, learned in Canva how to make the content ourselves, all of that. No one teaches you, no one taught us, and the only way to learn is by doing.
Yeah, oh, I love that. And it's true because nobody teaches you. And I think that was part of Leap Academy, right? Like I just felt like I don't know where to learn some of these things. But okay, so you somehow scrappy, you start this like tiny, or you think it's gonna be a tiny Facebook group. What happens then?
So we launched the Facebook group. We called it Female Invest.
What year was that, by the way?
So when we launched the Facebook group, that was 2017. And back then we thought this would just be a student organization, something small next to studying. And then this ball kind of started rolling and it got bigger and bigger. We turned it into a for-profit company in 2019.
Wait. We're not going there yet. Not yet. Okay. Not yet. So you're starting this Facebook group 2017. Yeah. And suddenly 400 sign up or something along the line, right? And they feel like it's part of a mission. Talk to us a little bit about what happened in those early days.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, on the day that we launched the Facebook group, we had more than 400 women who signed up to join. And our initial vision for Female Invest was that we just wanted a small group of women, like 10 to 20 women, to just drink some wine, talk about stocks, have a good time. But then suddenly hundreds of women were signing up and they wanted us to teach them about investing. And that's when we started realizing that this is, this lack of community is not just a problem we experience personally. This is a global problem. It impacts women around the world. It significantly impacts our freedom, our opportunities. So we started doing small educational events, first in classrooms, then in big lecture rooms. We outgrew those. We started partnering with big companies to use their spaces. And in the end, it created like a hype where tickets would sell out in minutes. And it became like there was a secondary market for the tickets. And we turned finance events into something cool, champagne, house music, never how you would have imagined it paired with education. Right. And that was really how the movement was built. The media was all over it. It just became such a massive hype thing. And interestingly, when we started out, we really made a point out of saying that we were not political at all. So even when we talked about the mission, we were like very, very delicate because we knew that, women who speak out are more likely to be shut down. And we just didn't want that to get in the way of what we were trying to do. But as we grew, and of course, much more in later years, which we'll get to, we also realized that with a great platform comes a great responsibility, and money is highly political, especially for women, which was also an interesting journey for us to go through.
Talk to me about what that means. What do you mean when you say political?
So money is power. Money is independence. The people with money are the ones who design not just the world we all live in, but also our day-to-day lives. And because of structures, and again, this is not an opinion, it's just facts, it's so well proven, because of a lot of structural barriers, women are falling behind. And that means that women have fewer opportunities in life. And we do live in a patriarchal world, and that just does not benefit women financially. And so there are some conversations we need to have with women. There is awareness to create. There is knowledge to be shared about how best to manage this, because when women have more money, it's better, not just for women, but for all of us, actually.
That's incredible that you still see the political side of this. And I agree. We've seen a little bit of that too. And again, I think I have an incredible supportive husband. I think I'm surrounded by a lot of these, but I think there's also people that get annoyed when the woman makes more. Like, and we've had those in Leap Academy, actually. We've had people that, or women that needed to leave a job every time they got a promotion. Like, I still remember that. And I was like, wait, what? You can't take the VP role? Like, that's an incredible role. Why can't you take it? Because my husband can't do that. Like, I can't make more than him. And so we have seen some of these for sure. But let's go with, and we'll talk about naysayers for a second, because I'm sure like there's a lot of thick skin as well that comes with the politics and stuff. And I want to get there. But at some point you need to monetize, you need to start scaling. maybe Scandinavia maybe is not enough. Maybe you need to get out of there. So talk to us a little bit about now the next phase. Like definitely people are interested. Women are coming in, you're starting to get the movement. What's next?
We realized pretty quickly that we were not able to scale the in-person events that we'd been hosting. After the first year and a half-ish, we had more than 25,000 women in person at our events, which is just unheard of. And we were just a roadshow, like touring around the Nordic countries. And we just hit kind of the ceiling for, only being able to be in one place at a time. And that's when we decided to launch an online version of our learning, turn it into a membership. By this point in time, we'd started to have a lot of demand also from other countries because our Instagram was in English. We started to have a few thousand followers there. And around the same time, COVID closed the world, which effectively meant that we lost all of our revenue, which still came from events and partnerships with financial institutions. And that really accelerated the shift to an online education platform.
Let's talk about COVID. So COVID hits. You essentially you just got an office. Like you're starting kind of. I think you're starting to grow. This is real. There's like expenses, and you're feeling like the hype. And then suddenly COVID shuts everything down. Right? Like walk me through what happened and how do you cope with it?
It was horrible. Like COVID closed everything in March, and we had gone full time from January 1st, which was also the point in time where we got our office and started having real expenses. I just turned down the job at McKinsey. And so it just felt horrible to lose everything when we just started. And now it's so easy, now that we made it through, to look back and say, oh, of course we would have made it through, but that was not at all obvious. And we actually agreed at one point to closing down the company because we couldn't pay our bills and we didn't have money or access to money, even though our expenses weren't that high. And what happened is that the day after we decided to close down the company, we woke up to the news that we were on the Forbes 30 under 30 list, and Forbes had shared us on their Facebook page. And so obviously we could not close down then.
You can't go bankrupt now.
We can't go bankrupt now. And so what we did is we just went back to the office, and then we just lived there during COVID. And I've never worked so many hours. Like even sleep was just an inconvenience, to get over with so we could continue. And very slowly we started to turn it around. And that was just, I think no words will be able to describe how insane of a feeling that actually was.
And I think one of the interesting things, and it's so easy, and I can't, again, this podcast, we've had hundreds of people that are doing some incredible things, running huge businesses, and almost every single one, or maybe every single one, had some of these near-death experiences. What do you think, I think one of the things that I'm hearing is that you shifted your thinking from, okay, I don't think we can do this. Like everything is closing down. There's not a possible way, to how do I do this? And I think your question of how is starting to force solutions. Walk me through, like, how do you, from that point on, start and literally bootstrap the first, I think you said, 10 employees or so?
Yes, we bootstrapped the company up to the first 10 employees. Which was insane. And it was a mix of so many things. People always ask, what's the secret, or what's the one thing that turned it around? But really it's a mix of 1,000 little things and an unreasonable amount of work. So what we did is that we learned obviously how to build the website, do all the content, do marketing ourselves. And in order to do paid marketing, obviously you need to have money to put in. And we had so little money in our bank account that we had to wait for money to be paid out by Facebook to put more in. I have a screenshot of our bank account at one point where we had $3 in it. Like that was how low it went. Like insanity. We had at one point a Christmas party, and we had to make it bring your own food and drinks because we just, we had like nothing. But it was also very fun. And what happened that really helped us is that within half a year of trying to turn the company around, we happened to win the world's largest startup competition, the Cartier Women's Initiative, and we won like the first place, which gives you $100,000 equity free. And obviously that was a major game changer as well.
But talk to me, Anna, for a second about that $3 in your bank account, because most people would stop way before that, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at this. What is the conversation with, like with your co-founders? Like what is with Camila, with Emma? Like what is the conversation to say, maybe we're wrong. Like maybe there's no way to do this.
Failing just didn't feel like an option. And it was a mix of two things. Like we already put in so much personally, time, dedication. So many people told us we couldn't do it. So just from a pride perspective, we just like there was no way we could leave it. But then also, and this is probably the biggest reason, is that this very, very quickly became a lot bigger than just us. Like this was not just about our dream. This is about a big issue that impacts every single woman listening now, every single woman out there. Like by existing in this world, you are by definition impacted. And that mission is just so deep. So now I feel that if I fail, I would fail all of the women that we're fighting for. And I just feel like I couldn't live with myself if that was to happen. And I think it's a blessing, but sometimes it's also a burden because the pressure is not just the company. It's, being the women who made it, not just the women who are building for other women, but also just the female entrepreneurs that now break glass ceilings and so on.
Right. And it's an incredible story. And I think in bootstrapping to the first 10 employees, I mean, Leap Academy now is bootstrapped, but it's after many years and a lot of more spare. It's incredibly hard. So first of all, huge kudos to you, Anna, and to your co-founders. Like it's incredible. And then you decide to go to Y Combinator. And that's been also a really interesting, I assume, experience. Talk to me a little bit about Y Combinator. And again, I got to mentor in startup accelerators like Google and Singularity University and others. So it's an incredible thing to see the founders that can actually lean in and get the, like the 300 people that wanted to invest after that. So talk to me a little bit about it.
For those who don't know, Y Combinator is a global accelerator. It's probably the most famous in the world, where companies like Airbnb and Dropbox started out. The acceptance rate to Y Combinator is half, I read. The acceptance rate to Howard University, so it's very hard to get in. And it's especially hard if you are a woman. I think the stats when we applied was that around 5% of the people who applied were female founders. And, I think there's a lot of things to say about that, about who we think are qualified. I would say our experience with Y Combinator was very mixed. We went into it so excited. We read about this. We applied 3 times. So for a year and a half, we put everything into it. We took a week off to rehearse for the interview, for an example. But I think the fact that no women are really allowed or are really let in is also very much reflected in the program itself. And I think in the end, I feel like we didn't really learn that much because we were so far ahead of all of the other companies that were in there. I read somewhere that the average company in Y Combinator has around $1,000 in monthly recurring revenue. We had $100,000 in monthly recurring revenue at that point in time. So we were just way ahead. And then also a lot of the advice just didn't really apply because the rules and the game when you're a female founder is not the same as when you are a male founder. But what we did get out of it was the very last day, which is pitching day. It's demo day. This is where all founders are given 60 seconds to pitch their company. And then investors from around the world tune in. And if they like what you're saying, they swipe right. And if they don't like it, they don't swipe at all. And after our 60 seconds, we had more than 300 investors that had swiped right and reached out. And that was a major game changer for us, both in terms of the valuations, the money we had access to, but also just the blue stamp and the network, because we knew no one who knew anyone. So
That's
even
incredible.
getting into the VC world can be such a barrier if you aren't a white man.
Right. And I agree. But you did something that I want to tap into, for a little bit, Anna, because when we listen to, you're right, it's not the same journey for men and women. The first impression is not the same. It's incredible hard to get out of the people's pile for many, many reasons. Again, I'm not judging it. I think we're all biased, by the way, men and women. Sometimes the women investors are even more biased. So I'm not, I don't think that there's a right or wrong. Like, I think we're just trying to build that and break that glass ceiling and give more templates of success, if you will. And that's part of why I'm so glad that we're talking, because I want the men and women to listen to this podcast and hear, because we all have biases. I have biases. We all do. But talk to me a little bit about, because we'll I do want to talk at some point also about your A round, et cetera. But when you go to investors, or when you say your journey is different, talk to me a little bit about why.
I would say that our experience aligns very, very well with what research shows as well. And I think in these conversations, it's so important to keep in mind that there's a difference between opinion and fact. And I think very often when we talk about, bias and inequality, whether it's, gender or race or whatever it is, I think people often confuse the two. But just sticking to facts, which I really like to do, then female founders and founders of color as well are underfunded. When a female founder and a male founder present the same pitch word for word, many studies in this, I encourage everyone to Google afterwards, men are significantly more likely to get funded. Women are asked different questions when pitching. They're asked much more about risk, whereas men are asked more about potential. Women are judged differently as well, whether it's how likable they are or how competent they are. Then there's also the whole issue with having access to networks, and again, so well researched that women in general just struggle to be included in high-powered networks because they're often made up of men. And all of that is textbook proven over and over again. So that's a fact.
Right.
And then moving on to my personal opinion is that that's what I experienced as well. I think exactly what research shows is what we experienced. And, some people say that that type of resistance makes them more motivated. That's really not the case for me. And I think it's a bit, naive to say that, because when you're told over and over again, like hundreds of times, that you don't fit in, that you don't have potential, you're not the right person to build this, you're not good enough, then it's very hard to not start believing it. And I really thank, myself for being three. I thank us for being three. I think that really helped us through.
Walk me through a situation that you remember, because I've been ignored many, many times, Anna. One of the reasons why, I try to very specifically be on a stage or I try to play a different game now, because I know that otherwise, if I'm going to be in a leveling playing field, it's not going to help. Just a regular networking event or regular dining in for, environment, like that is not going to that's not going to be a good one for me. But I needed to learn this the hard way. And I agree. It is actually heartbreaking to see it. Walk me through a situation where you felt either ignored or completely okay, what is going on?
So the interesting thing is, of course, there are a few examples where, we really felt like our boundaries were crossed, whether it was, going to strip clubs for investor events or being, skipped when founders went around the table to talk about their business at an investor dinner, and we were skipped, as the only women because, they just didn't want to hear what we had to say. There are some very clear examples I could come up with, but the most dangerous and impactful ones, I think, are all of the microaggressions that happen, all the subtle things in the questions you asked, or, not being asked any questions at a dinner, the way that all of your little mistakes are like nitpicked and doubled down on in a way that a man's never would be. So I think it's all of the smaller things, not feeling welcome, not feeling comfortable. Sometimes even before you go to an event, it just is so draining because you're going to have to all the time, fight for people to take you seriously, which they most likely won't do.
Right.
So I think it's all of the microaggressions actually that make it harder than the bigger things because they happen more rarely and I can deal with those. It's the in between the lines that are the hardest to deal with.
And again, I think what's interesting is, and I want to give some perspective, Anna, I mean, what you three, right, achieved, for example, in the crowdfunding space, they literally raised $1 million in 4 minutes. They broke any ceiling possible. So we're talking about obviously very, very, very capable, three founders. They happen to be women, but that's unrelated, just incredibly capable. So when we're looking at biases and we're looking to solve a problem, it's not about victim mentality or crying. This is real. Like this, the first impression for women is harder. I remember still getting from my, one of my, bosses at the time, like, hey, you should go to and buy shoes with my wife, or getting, brochures to, take care of my skin. And I'm like, is this really like ever held us back in the company? Like, why am I getting those? But I agree. So walk through, like, let's talk about that crowdfunding, because I think, first of all, that is incredible. I think you also mentioned you probably don't want to do that ever again. But let's talk about that crowdfunding, because that's incredible what you achieved.
So we decided to raise $1 million as part of our Series A. We decided to limit it at $1 million because it was not about the money, and we didn't want it to send the wrong signal that we couldn't raise from VCs. We just really wanted our community to also have ownership in the company because we are community made. So we launched our crowdfunding campaign, and as you said, we broke multiple world records. I think it was 6, fastest to 1 million, and also the highest number of investors. And obviously not everyone could invest. We had tens of thousands of investors who wanted to invest, but we just didn't have enough shares. We beat Revolut, which is a major bank here in Europe, as the biggest crowdfunding campaign ever. So as you say, when I'm talking about having a hard time raising money from VCs, it's not because I have some little company without revenue and no experience and no skills in pitching. We had top numbers. We had a very strong company, and still it was so hard. And in the end, we ended up raising $24 million, which makes us some of the women in Europe to ever raise the most money, sadly.
Amazing. So, but I did want to put that in perspective, right? Like, it's not something that you don't know how to do. You know how to raise money. The numbers were there. The health of the company was there. And still, I think you got a ton of no's from investors. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So I think getting no's is part of any fundraising journey, and I'm totally fine with that. When it stops being fine is when you start comparing your journey to, your male peers, when you start sharing experiences. And sometimes we just had to laugh, like when they shared, how they got funded, or the numbers they had, or, how it happened, because it just seemed like, I almost want to say like comical, how vastly different it was. What usually happened for us is that we would pitch to women at entry-level positions who would love it. We started actually setting a limit that we only wanted to meet with one entry-level person, because otherwise we just got passed around. Right. Then we would usually go up, one to like a person in a middle layer, and they would usually also like kind of, like it. Maybe not getting fully what we do, but liking the numbers. And then we would be passed up in most of the cases to the investment committees, which is 9 out of 10 times, if not 10 out of 10 times, just a bunch of old white men. And you just know the moment, like you walk into the meeting or you log onto the call, you just know no matter what I say, like I'm done. Like they don't want to invest in anything by or for women. We stopped counting after 107 no's. And yeah, it was really hard, but in the end, we made it. We ended up getting 5 term sheets, which was really exciting for being able to negotiate and, choose a deal that was really good. But definitely was a tough journey to get there.
Let's talk about those 107 no's, because I think most people will stop after 8 or whatever. Like it gets really painful. And self-doubt is real, especially because I know what, building a business means. I'm sure you had a lot of hates. I'm sure there's a lot of comments. I'm sure there's a lot of, and now you need to deal with all of it together. Share a hard moment. And what does it feel? And how do you get over it?
I think the hardest moments are when you feel like it's unfair, because I can deal with not being good enough, or, if the numbers are off, I can deal with that. Interestingly, I would actually say the hardest part was almost after we closed the money and announced it, because it had taken, I would say, a piece of our soul to close that Series A round. It was so hard. My co-founder was heavily pregnant, puking up until the day that she gave birth. We signed the documents on her due date and the money got wired while she was giving birth. Like, it was insane. And when we then closed the money, I expected that now it was over. Now we could be happy. Now we could celebrate. Now we could set an example also and show other women that it is possible and show the industry, a success story. But what happened is that we got so much hate when we closed the funding round, which completely took me by surprise. And a lot of it was centered around people saying, making it a bad thing that we raised the money and accusing us of being not good at business because we had to raise money, because we just had such big losses and we spent the money on glitz and glamour, and kind of portraying us as reckless women just spending money on, shit and parties, which felt so unfair because we just worked so much harder than any man to break glass ceilings that, so few women have broken. And then finally, when we reach the top, bloody and bruised, just to stand there with a lot of mediocre men, they turn around and they tell us that what we just did, which men do all the time because it's so much easier for them, was bad, and it meant that we were bad founders. And that was very hard. Like, I would say that almost broke me because it was so unfair, yeah.
How do you recover? Like, how do you help each other go through this? Because hate can get really hard. And I think there was somebody, John Anna-Sophie, that actually shared here in the podcast and said, if you don't have hate, you're not relevant. And I was like, oh God, I needed to hear this. I was just like, but how do you deal with it, Anna?
I think I'm not very good at dealing with it. I think it's getting better. But we've all definitely struggled a lot with anxiety. Now this episode also ended up being a lot about, the challenges around being a female founder. And I think every time I talk, it just is a topic that naturally comes in because it's such a big part of our story. But as a person, I'm not someone who likes conflict. I don't enjoy, talking about injustice or bringing up topics where people would disagree. Like, it actually takes a lot of energy and it's a big cause for anxiety. But I also cannot choose not to talk about it because that wouldn't be right. And the way I've found works best to deal with it is working on my physical body, exercise now every morning, sleeping. I had to completely change my diet, also just to have more stable glucose levels. So I think working on my body has really helped because I can't always control my mind in those situations.
And that's incredible. And again, the reason why I wanted to talk about the truth, because I think it is hard. And we're going to talk also about the impact that you all do. But I think it's also, people, men and women, to see that it gets really, really hard. And eventually the people that can create the bigger impact in the world are just the people that don't stop, despite everything, despite the hate, despite the no, despite everything, to just continue. So I do appreciate that you're sharing that journey, because I think at the end of the day, most people kill their dreams because they stop way before the results could have happened. So I think we're just impatient creatures as well. But unrelated, you went through a lot. So I want, people to hear this. But let's talk for a second about the huge impact that you're making. I think you have, I don't know, last I've seen, I don't know, like 60 million impression a month. Like you're creating like massive impact, and you're doing whatever you can to close the financial gap. Talk to me a little bit about some of the things, and maybe what are the things that women miss? What are the big things that we don't know?
So where to start? So I think what we've built is a movement, like truly a global movement, where women who never thought that they would be interested in anything around money or investing starts to realize that this is not about the actual money. It's not about having an interest in investing. I don't even know if I have an interest in investing. It's about wanting to have ownership of your own future. And that's relevant for everyone, no matter who you are. And the biggest mistake I see women make is assuming that they won't be good at it, or that they don't have to do it. Things will work out, but they won't, or at least not as well as they could have. And one of the things I'm the most proud of is seeing the diversity also in the movement that we've created. Women from around the world, women from all ages and all backgrounds, because I think making this topic something for the masses, I really feel like it's a big achievement and something that brings me so much joy.
Oh, and I can see it in your eyes, by the way. And again, we're huge on what we call portfolio career. Like I do believe that the future is more about multiple ventures and multiple things that people will be busy doing, because it's not just about creating that paycheck, but also the life that you want with the paycheck. And, to me, that's what creates this mega snowball, and I'm excited about it. But what are some of the stories maybe of a woman that you could see that her life is changing because she's starting to be more financial aware, if you will?
We get messages every single day, every day, and it's women again from all walks of life. I especially like the ones where they turn something around. We very often see it with women who've gone through divorce. Women are, again, fact, not opinion, significantly worse off financially. The financial hit that women take is around twice as hard on average as the hit men take, despite the way we talk about it in society that women rip men off. That's not the case on average. And I really enjoy seeing women who've been wrecked financially turn it around, start to feel secure again, and be able to plan actually for the future. I think that's probably what I enjoy the most.
That's incredible. So when they start learning a little bit about finance and equality, and what do you feel is one of the biggest shift that people or women need to hear, or maybe overall, like men and women need to hear about closing the gender gap?
I think what we all need to understand is that this is not men versus women. I know now I talked a lot about how hard it is to be a woman, but it's not to pit women against men. As you say, we all have bias. So this is not one group against the other. And I think what we really need to understand is that working together, all of us benefits all of us. Like economies grow, we get more innovative solutions, companies grow as well. Like we all win when we allow women to play on an even playing field. So this is really not, about bringing men down or, creating more walls. It's about working together. And it is very easy to, build walls between each other, but I don't think that's the right solution. I think working together is the way forward.
Yeah. And I agree, Anna. Like, I think one of the things that we pride ourselves in Leap Academy, that somehow we became 50-50 in terms of the clients, and we were helping thousands of clients a year. So, the 50-50 shocks me every single time. But you do need many times the men to bring you into the opportunities. So you definitely, so I think it is very, very important for them to be around the women to, and to help out. What would you want the women to know when they're hearing this conversation? What do you want the men to know?
What I want the women to know is that they are capable and they are talented enough. So to stop listen to anyone, including themselves, telling them that they aren't enough and then just go for it. I think we're brought up to believe that we aren't good enough and to question ourselves and not take up space. But I really urge any woman listening to this to challenge that stereotype. And for the men listening, I really urge you to open doors for the women around you. I think when you are in a position of privilege, it's often very difficult to acknowledge, because despite being in a position of privilege, it's also not easy to be a man. They also face challenges.
Right.
But really opening doors, helping out, trying to be understanding. And if there is anything that feels unfair to you, then just try to, no, then maybe don't challenge it. I think it's very tempting, if we feel like we're being attacked or it's unfair, to then really speak out, even though we don't have all of the facts, but maybe just sit back and listen.
Right. Yeah. And I think, Anna, what I love about these conversations, and for me, listeners, if you're hearing this, I think catch yourself when you show bias. I think I found myself biased for sure, against women, against men, against whatever, against color. Like, we all have biases. It's kind of inevitable. I think the question is, what do you decide to do about it? And if you decide to challenge yourself and really do listen and give, a true chance, I think it really is really, really important. I think it's the awareness that needs to happen first, because the problem is what we're not even aware of the bias. And so, Anna, like, what would you say were, if you're kind of looking back, what are some, and again, there's a big mission in front of you, and, I'm wishing you so much luck and success and all of this, but if you're looking back, what are some of like the biggest lessons that you want to, personally for Anna, and maybe for the founders that are hearing this, what would you want to do differently or learn better?
So many things. I think on a smaller levels, there are so many things, from building teams to leading to, ways of building the company, but boiling it down to a few bigger things. I think one thing would be to think even bigger from the beginning. It can be very hard when you come from nothing and you haven't seen anyone do what you want to do. I think thinking big enough can be very hard. But even if you don't reach, the goal you set, you're likely to get a lot closer if you put the bar higher. So be a little bit delusional. It never hurt anyone to shoot for the stars. And I think if we had done that also from the beginning, back then I didn't even have the fantasy to imagine that it could be what it is today. But had I had that, we might have done some things differently in the beginning in terms of the bets we took, the legal foundation, everything. A lot of decisions would have been different. So think about where you want, your company to go, and then start acting like it from the beginning, even though you aren't there yet.
Oh, that's powerful, Anna. I love that. It is really, really hard when you're scrappy and you're like trying to take those imperfect steps. But it is really, really interesting to try to envision what is success and what does that look like. Where do they find you? How do they reach, you?
Instagram is probably the best. So, through our website, we have an amazing team also getting back to everyone, but otherwise social media, both for me, but also for Female Invest. And if anyone wants to start learning, we have, of course, our app as well. It's free to get started. So,
and they
why
just
not?
search for Female Invest and
Yes,
they find all
it
of
will
it.
come up.
And we're going to have a lot of things in the show notes as well. Anna, I'm so proud of what you all created. Anything else that you want kind of last to summarize for our listeners here?
I think just underlining that we need more women starting businesses. We need more money in the hands of women. It's good for everyone. And it's also a lot of fun along the way. Like, yes, it is hard, but I've also never had as much fun as I've had both building this company, but also building my own wealth on the side. I mean, it is pretty fun to watch your money grow. So if anyone listening has not started that journey yet, then get started, because it's a long one. It's not as quick as social media might want you to believe. So you better get started now.
And I agree. And again, at the end of the day, it's about freedom of choice, right? And it's about creating that opportunity for yourself to create that freedom. And in order to do that, it's not going to be the only, there's no way it's only about that one 5K, 10K promotion that you're going to get. That's not what's going to change the rest of your life. It's cool, but what's going to change your life is when you're going to know how to create money and create more portfolio of money and portfolio of things and ventures and just have fun along the journey. Because at the end of the day, why would we do all of this if not to have a ton of fun, Anna? Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
More episodes that you're going to love are right around the corner. So definitely make sure to click the like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, who in your life should see this today? Do share this with them. This will inspire and help those you care about and helps us continue to bring amazing guests. And I will see you there.